Hello, welcome to the 10th installment of the past Facebook Live Pop-Up Expert Series. In this series, we have the opportunity to ask any of your Optane SSD and data technology related questions in a real time. If you have a question you'd like to ask, please type your comment on the section below and they'll appear on the screen. We love hearing questions, so go ahead and start. My name is Alessandro. I work for Intel on the Optane SSD team on the what they call NSG, which is No Volatile Solutions Group. I've been working with Microsoft technologies for about 20 years now, ranging from Active Directory, Microsoft Exchange, and SQL, but more on the hardware performance aspect. So I've been dealing tracing and debugging on the performance. So it was a good opportunity for me to talk about Optane memory and SSD. So let's see and go ahead. And if you can start sending me your questions, that would be great. Thank you. So first question, how does Optane technology change the current hardware design? That's an interesting question. So with the advent of Optane technology, with its new type of media, Intel developed either a SSD aspect, which is a normal block storage device, which you've been using for quite some time right now. But on the memory side, using the same type of media, on a DIMM form factor, we introduced a persistent memory module with high capacities, which enables you to choose the best case scenario for fast and ultra fast block storage access and memory, persistent memory points. So that changed the way we design hardware, where you have more options in balancing your memory footprint or having a really large memory footprint that enables with the Xeon second generation scalable processors. So the idea is that you have more options to design your hardware in order to make the most of your SQL deployments as far as performance and availability. Second question, why should a DBA be concerned to learn about hardware concepts? Isn't everything going to the cloud? Well, technically, yes. We have a lot of everything is virtualized now, and the cloud push is very big. But I still see a lot of on-premises deployment where knowing about how the hardware behaves in certain aspects helps you debug performance and even design for your best case. So we're not only concerned about your normal usage, but peak usage failure scenarios. Whereas knowing how the hardware behaves or under certain aspect, for instance, how a SSD behaves under write pressure, could tell you how your queries will behave. Because if you're doing you're having a heavily write SSD and you need to read those commands will be stuck behind all those writes and you have a peak latency. Also with Optane, we need to know how memory mode works. So what does it mean to have memory mode? So you have a part of your DRAM acting as another cache layer to access that memory footprint. So knowing how big is your working set, how big is your DRAM part, how big is your Optane PM capacity will tell you how to better prepare for certain aspects. And also, cloud providers will run under hardware, even though it's all virtualized. But understanding how the cloud providers and asking them how they are deploying the hardware technology will help you select the best case and the best provider for your particular workload. So how can you decide between Optane SSD and persistent memory? So basically, you need to understand if your current solution does support persistent memory, either both on hardware and software points, because that's will make sure you can take advantage of the persistent memory DIMMs. We need to remember that the persistent memory DIMMs can be presented as storage mode as a block device. So even if your software is not ready to take advantage of direct access and persistent memory semantics, you still can use Optane persistent memory DIMMs as a ultra-fast block device. But what will determine is how your software and hardware uses that. So does it support? Otherwise, you still have Optane SSD as a fast block device, which will show as a regular NVMe or a block device to your operating system. So regarding the supportability of Optane persistent memory, dual Xeon Scalable second generation support Optane. Not all. You should always refer to our support page, arc.intel.com, to see which models will support Optane persistent memory. Technically, most gold and platinum SKUs will support persistent memory, but not all. And there might be some special SKUs that will support Optane persistent memory. So that's only regarding Optane persistent memory. Optane SSDs, any platform, Xeon Scalable second generation, first generation, Broadwell, will support because it's just a PCIe slot, as long as the hardware has a PCIe slot available. So, question regarding Optane SSD and other SSDs. Is it just another SSD? As far as the operating system is concerned, it will see as another SSD, but a Optane SSD or P4800X for enterprise has a completely new media, which is the 3D crosspoint, has ultra low latency access and high endurance, which other SSDs won't have. And the peak latencies and P99s, the quality of service of Optane SSD is on higher degree than other regular SSDs, what we call 3D NAND, because there is no garbage collection, page access. So we can change the media, the data in the media, straight on a bit address. So we don't have to read a whole page and change something inside that page and write back again. So that creates a predictable access pattern and access latency. And we do not have much of the oversubscription to achieve endurance. So the media itself is has a high endurance, which allows us also to use that as a memory device. So technically, they are completely different from an operating system perspective. They will be presented as the same device bus as NVMe. But it will be a really good use case to look at the Optane SSD for TempDB transactional logs or ultra fast database where you could fit the whole database file on Optane device. Another question, is Optane persistent memory the same as a NVDIMM? Again, technically it would be the answer very similar to the previous one, the difference between Optane SSD and a regular SSD. Both Optane persistent memory and NVDIMM will be presented as a persistent memory device. They will go through basically the same path through a driver, SCM driver, or a storage class memory driver. They will support persistent memory semantics like load store, but they have different components. So NVDIMM will be just a regular DIMM media, so the ones that you already use on your current hardware, with a capacitor in order to prevent data loss during power cycles, for instance. So the media itself is different on Optane persistent memory DIMM and NVDIMM. So that's on one point. The other point is the capacity point, where Optane persistent memory DIMMs, they start at 128 gigabytes up to 512. So that's another advantage of using Optane PM as storage and as persistent memory, because you have a higher capacity point. So your use cases increase a lot. And Optane persistent memory in memory mode will add to your memory footprint, whereas the NVDIMM will be used as a persistent memory device. So it will not add to increase the memory footprint of a server. So you cannot grow your memory address table with NVDIMMs, but since NVDIMM is a persistent memory device, you could extend your buffer pool. For instance, you can use stay-log scenarios with NVDIMM devices, as long as you can fit inside the capacities that they are allowed today. I hope that answers your questions there. Question, what are the modes for Optane PM and how do I change it? I think you mean the modes for Optane PM. So we have 3 use modes. In this case, we have a memory mode, which basically adds the device as the name says, as memory. So it extends your memory footprint and makes your DRAM use as a cache level. So you have a mix of, you're always going to have a mix of DRAM and Optane persistent memory on your server. So we need to work on the best placement of Optane DIMMs on your server. So that's one point that is really critical to understand. Another mode, what we call app direct. So the app direct mode is the one who will create the persistent memory scenarios where you're going to use load, store semantics, use a file system index mode. In this case, Windows will be NTFS file system. That's the one who supports to be formatted as DEX mode. And the third mode would be what we call storage over app direct. It's basically present the Optane persistent memory DIMMs as a storage device. So it will act as a regular block device, but you won't have any load store semantics or any direct access. So it will behave as a regular storage device. So we go to the whole I/O stack, your volume manager, your file system, the way we always used. So we need to make sure that on that mode we have uh, the understanding that the latencies will be added on the software stack will be low enough in order to take advantage of the ultra low latency of that device. So one advice I always have is we always need to test and do a POC, understand how you want to use, where the use case that you think about it. And where do you change it? Those are all BIOS options. So you need to enter your OEM BIOS and change the mode. So that's basically why we have Xeon Scalable second generation support along with Optane persistent memory. And again, those modes are not exclusive, so you can mix and match. So you can use part of your persistent memory, Optane persistent memory capacity to be used as a memory, and other part to be used as a app direct, and another one as a storage mode. So you can have different use case on the same server. So you're not attached. So if I need the memory mode, I will not use other modes. It can be used like that. We just, again, need to test everything. So because it's our new technology comes with new challenges, and that's a point that I always point out to everybody who wants to use Optane, either on the SSD part or the persistent memory, is that we need to understand our workloads and test it, to make sure we take advantage of the whole technology. That's a good question, though. Well, biggest challenges you see facing data professional over the next 5, 10, 20 years. As a data professional, everything is going to come how you store data and how you can take advantage of that amount of data. So every day we're generating tons of data, and we are bound to store them in order to make actual predictions. So as a data scientist, I see how you use that data in a fashionable way. So how fast you can predict some outcome out of your historical data. How you going to store the data in a cheap way, but at the same time that whenever you have the need to access it, how you're going to retrieve that. So as a hardware profession, that's what I see the biggest challenge for data profession. But it is on the right track. Everything is data today. Any IoT device will generate tons of unstructured data, and that's the point. How you convert out that unstructured data on top of your models, and connecting all those data probably will mean that you're going to do a lot of machine learning and on top of the data, because the amount of data is so vast. So how to store and use that data will be a challenge for everybody. Nice question. What new things can I expect to learn during upcoming past marathon with Intel and Microsoft? Well, I think we'll go over our new releases on both hardware and software and how we both integrate together. New either use cases and how the newest technology will enable you to do your job better and faster. So we have upcoming sessions now with uh, Pass Marathon right around the corner in May, and we'll be talking about how the data-centric model is changing the way we work. So Intel and Microsoft are always in the forefront, either on premises or in the cloud. It's always a strong partnership. Particularly, I'm very curious, and I would like to see more uses of persistent memory and how we will change the software uh, part when we integrate more and more softwares to use persistent memory, because that will change how we store data and how we access data as well. So yeah, that's I brush over that question. So the question was, can I use more than one type of mode in the same server? So when I was talking about the Optane PM, persistent memory mode, that uh, was basically I was talking about that you can mix and match what you need. So you can mix memory mode and app direct mode, storage over app direct, and actually use Optane SSDs as well. So understanding how your software will behave and what are the needs. Do I have some stalls, locks on my I/O subsystem, on my page subsystem that will point out where to use a particular mode. For instance, today you can for SQL 2019 CTP, there is a feature called the hybrid buffer pool, where you have to use persistent memory point. So you can use Optane PM and app direct mode and extend your buffer pool with persistent memory. But you can choose how much of that extension will be used, and the rest of that capacity can be used in memory mode. So you could use both sides. Or if you're talking about a today SQL 2019 CTP on a Linux platform, they are enlightened. So you could have a Optane persistent memory in app direct mode, and all your database files, transaction logs, being direct used as in a persistent memory form. So you have direct access, which will change the way you use. And you can choose a part of that capacity to be only on a storage over app direct, and put other databases on that platform. So it will give you a flexibility to identify which components you want fast, really fast, or uber fast access time. But understanding how you are being stop is not the right word, but how your stalls happen inside your database operations is key. So you can use the correct mode and take advantage of the current technology. That's really good. Another question from so how Optane will work with SQL Server 2019 and things we should know and consider. So the support will differ if you're using SQL 2019 for Linux or for Windows. For Linux is technically the full support of all modes, uh, in a sense that you can place your database files if you're using SQL 2019 CTP today on a persistent memory fashion. On SQL 19 on Windows, the support is not the full support yet, but you still can use the tail of the log scenario that we used to have. You can use hybrid buffer pool. You can use memory mode, which does not need to change anything on the software as long as the operating system supports, and the ISV, in this case Microsoft, supports memory mode on Windows 2019. So, and things we should know and consider. So on memory mode, we need to understand that the part that we have, the amount of DRAM that we have on the server will act as cache. And the part of Optane persistent memory that we have in memory mode will be presented to your operating system. So your operating system will address whatever it is on memory mode, if we have memory mode, and leave the DRAM to act as cache. So understanding how big is your working set or your hot data within that working set will help you understand what's the correct ratio between DRAM and Optane persistent memory. Another is to understand how much throughput I'm expecting to generate. So if you have a HTAP workload, or in this case, a OLAP workload, where you have tons of data ingestion and we need throughput, we need to understand that adding your Optane persistent memory will change the expected behavior of full DRAM systems. So understand the throughput and it's key that I've seen, because right now, even though we call SQL as enlightened, in memory mode, this is a kind of a hidden memory. So there will be parts of memory that will have different access pattern, or not access pattern, but access latency, because will be pages on DRAM being accessed through DRAM cache, and the other ones being accessed straight from the Optane persistent memory. And they will have some access difference, and that's can, depending on the workload, they can have not the expected results. So testing will be key in this scenario. Thanks. That was a good question. Question: I'm not ready to upgrade hardware. How can I take advantage of Optane technology? So in this case, if you're not going to a hardware that supports Optane persistent memory, the option that you have is using Optane SSDs to your current SQL server. Either if it is 2019 or older, it will use Optane SSDs, so ultra-fast Optane SSDs. And I've seen good examples on TempDB and transaction logs acceleration, where you can just place your or move from your SAN to your transaction logs and TempDB from your SAN to your local server and place them on Optane SSDs. So that's one way to start looking at it. So almost close to the half hour. Do we have any further questions? And also, I'll stay to answer some other questions if they come. So thanks for joining on that on this past Facebook Live. I hope you enjoy as much as I did, and I love talking about Optane. And if you do have any further questions, please stay, and I'll stay on the line to answer. And you can hit me on Twitter as well. Love to connect to Twitter. And just remember that my previous session on 24-hour hop is available on demand, and you can also check out our past marathon, modernizing your data platform, which will feature some Optane technology slides as well. Thank you very much. See if we have any further questions. Thank you very much for your time, and hope you to see you soon in any other Facebook Live or